Hello, I'm Charlotte Cohen and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Thursday the 22nd of January. And we've got two massive Europa League ties to look forward to.
Down the right hand side of the box, low ball across, might break to Nygren, chance! Oh, it's in! Nygren scores it off the underside of the bar! Seismic goal for Celtic!
Celtic are in Bologna with Martin O'Neill's side in contention for making the knockout stages. There's also another massive tie at Ibrox.
I think it's a competition where we have not won so far. I think this is our challenge, we want to win. I think it's also important, we want to keep the momentum. I think win is a win, doesn't matter which competition.
Rangers face Ludogorets, knowing a win is a must to keep their hopes of the knockout round alive. And back to domestic matters, Aberdeen's search for a new manager continues.
You're seeing Aberdeen trying to reset a little bit in January, and it's difficult when you don't have a manager because obviously the new guy might come in and have different ideas of what he wants.
We'll give you the lowdown on all the big Scottish football stories.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
And alongside me to do that this morning, former Hearts and Dundee United manager Robbie Neilson. Robbie, good morning. How's it going?
Morning, all good, thanks. Very good.
Good stuff. And Stephen McGowan, Herald football writer. Stephen, good morning. Welcome.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you very much.
Well, plenty to get stuck into with Robbie and Stephen this morning. Let's start in sunnier climes of Italy. Celtic facing Bologna. They're 24th in the table, so they're still in with a chance of making it into the knockout phase. Stephen, anything from tonight's game would be a real bonus for them.
Yeah, I think it's acknowledged, Charlotte, that 10 points would probably be enough to claim a playoff place. So you're looking at potentially a very rare, precious win in Italian soil, which would be tough, but Bologna haven't been in the greatest form of late. If not, then they would play Utrecht and Glasgow in the last game. And then, they've got to balance that with domestic considerations, which is a top of the table clash against Hearts on Sunday. Obviously the one bonus for Celtic now is that they've signed a striker. The bad news is that they can't play him, I don't think, in the Europa League tonight. Thomas Vankara has come in and Martin O'Neill says he's not the immediate answer to the potential problems. I think they still want another striker. I think they still want a right winger. Raksaki of Crystal Palace is an option, but I'm not sure he's a top option. On the right side of centre-back, if possible a number 6 in midfield. So actually, even though Celtic still have a chance of going to the playoff of the Europa League, I think most of the focus and the attention is still very much on transfer matters at the moment.
Stephen mentions the new striker coming in, Robbie. They've obviously, as Stephen says, not got him for tonight if that deal gets over the line. But what do you see Martin O'Neill going with tactically tonight? Do you think he'll play Maeda up front? Do you think Johnny Kenny will get a run out? What do you see him doing?
It's a difficult one because they're still obviously in contention of going through, but then there's a huge game at the weekend, Maeda's struggled really in that striker position. I think Martin is a manager that will come in and gets people in positions that they like playing in rather than try to force them into positions to get into a system. So I can see Maeda going back out of the wing and maybe Kenny coming into the striker position, because they're more comfortable in there. But I do think, obviously, you have to win every game at Celtic, as most teams nowadays. But I think there'll be a slight eye on the weekend because it is a huge, huge game with it in the context of the league.
The other thing for Celtic is last time we saw them in the Europa League, it was under Wilfred Nancy. And it was quite a humbling night for them. Defensively, they really struggled. Stephen, Bologna seemed to create a lot of chances. Do you think Celtic now, under Martin O'Neill, are defensively solid enough to combat that?
They've certainly become better. Under Wilfred Nancy, I think there was something like 18 goals in these 8 games and they were losing sort of 2 a game minimum. Martin O'Neill makes them more dogged, a bit more rigid, a bit harder to beat. The players are more comfortable with the back four. But I think the one thing you would say looking at Bologna and Celtic is it's difficult to predict a 0-0 draw. Bologna are not in the best form either. There's obviously an interesting side story with Lewis Ferguson playing against Callum McGregor. I think Lewis Ferguson's played against Celtic 16 times and has never won. I think he's lost 13 of them. So I think this will be his chance, probably the best chance he'll have tonight, to put that right. I suppose if you're Martin O'Neill and Celtic, you're looking back at that game, that performance in Feyenoord, and thinking they want a bit more of that. Just don't know whether they're quite up to that point at the moment. still this kind of feeling of slight turmoil around Celtic at the moment. It's just a case of applying sticking plasters, trying to steady the ship.
Robbie, what about Lewis Ferguson? Because Scotland fans are obviously keeping a close eye on him to see if he can get a bit more game time looking ahead to the World Cup. But have you been impressed with him for Bologna this season?
Yeah, I think he's been phenomenal the last couple of years. I know he had a bad injury last season. I think he's still probably coming back from that. I don't think he's right at 100%. He's obviously a big player for them. I think tonight will be really interesting to see how he does against one of the top Scottish teams. But I do think it will be a very tough game for Celtic. I think that they have to be a bit more pragmatic defensively, and I think Martin will be like that. There's no doubt. And Bologna haven't been doing great, but they're still sitting 8th in Serie A. You know what I mean? So they're still a top team, and they've got some real good players in it. So I don't think that Celtic will be going out there and being too gung-ho. So I would expect them to be pretty solid defensively, or try to be. But it will be interesting to see how Lewis does. Because as Stephen says, it's a huge game for him to be playing against Celtic, just to show what he can do, what level he's at now. Because he did really well in Scotland, and he's went to an even higher level. But I do think he's still getting back from that kind of long-term injury. But it'll be good to see.
Well, you look at those. Just recently, Celtic played Roma, of course, in Glasgow, and they were outclassed. Rangers were pretty much well outplayed by Roma as well. You wouldn't say Roma are absolute top in terms of Italian teams, so that gives you an idea of just how tough a task this is, particularly on Italian soil.
Rangers also have a bit of a tough task. They have obviously really struggled in Europe, just the 1 point. But Ludogorets looks potentially a winnable game for them, Robbie?
Yes, potentially. Again, they're on a really good run. I think Danny Rose came in and really solidified them. They look a lot more organised, a lot more solid. Obviously, they still aren't, in my opinion, playing great. I think there's still a few levels. I think they need a little bit more in the recruitment department, to try and get the quality in there. But again, it's a very winnable game. You're looking at a team who's sitting, third in their own league. It's a league similar to our style, standard wise. I think they're just above Celtic in the group stage table as well. So it's a very, very winnable game. But as we know, these games are always difficult. So it'll be interesting to see how Rangers do in a game that probably they're going in as favourites, especially for the Rangers fans.
And I mean, if they want any hope of progressing through even getting into the knockouts, they need a lot of things to go their way, not least even 2 wins from their next 2 games.
Yeah, there's this intriguing scenario, isn't it, about automatic qualification for the Champions League next season. I think it's Olympiacos in Greece who are their main threat there. They had a good win the other night there against German opposition. If they go to Ajax next week, then they would, and they won that game, albeit it's very tough in Amsterdam, they would be odds on to claim that automatic qualification place as long as they won the Greek League. But Rangers still got that simmering away in the background. There's not really any dead rubbers. This is a bit of a reversal of the normal we've seen from Rangers in the Europa League in recent seasons, whereby they've been struggling domestically and the Thursday nights have been a form of therapeutic relief. Well, they haven't won the last 9 games of the Europa League, but they're actually better in domestic football now. So I agree with Robbie. I think this is the most winnable game that they've had for quite some time, stretching back to Fenerbahce last March. And I think Danny Rowe will want to keep that forward momentum in a game which they really should be looking for 3 points.
One of the things they have really struggled with is like Celtic, is the defensive aspect of games. Since Danny Rowe's come in and steadied the ship, it does seem like, Robbie, maybe those problems have been ironed out.
Yeah, I think they have. I think they're looking a lot more defensively solid, but I think that's as a team, rather than just a back four and goalkeeper. I think when previously, they were very, very open. The centre backs were getting left exposed a lot of the time, with full backs going forward. I think now he's come in and quite a kind of German setup of how they play, very, very rigid defensively. They press pretty aggressively. But again, I think tonight, when you get to these European competitions, you're playing against a higher level, a higher calibre of striker. So a lot of times in Scotland, you'll give up 4 chances and maybe only lose 1. If you do that against a top European team, you'll probably lose 3 goals. So it's a huge swing depending on the level of player you're playing against. But I do think he's come in and two things: he's solidified him defensively, and he's also brought a kind of the spirit back to the team, which I think will be evident tonight. The fans will be on side. It'll be a great atmosphere, and it'll be interesting to see how Ludogorets handle that. The intensity of the stadium.
That is one thing Danny Rowe mentioned in his press conference yesterday about wanting to keep this momentum going. I suppose, Stephen, when you're on this kind of difficult run in Europe, just getting any sort of win is going to do wonders for the confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As I say, you have to go back to last March and the last time they won in the Europa League. I think if you're Rangers, you just want momentum, don't you? Because you don't want to lose that. You just feel as if Rangers have turned a corner. So we're referring to there's positivity around the place. The fans are back on side. They believe in what they see from Danny Rowe. They feel as if the club hierarchy have learned from their mistakes and they're moving in the right direction now. Andrew Kavanagh has shown a bit of humility in that regard. He has made changes. So you don't want to lose that in any shape or form. And ultimately, there's a big domestic picture happening here where you can see Rangers now as really genuine potential champions of Scotland, especially with Celtic and Hearts likely to cut each other's throats on Sunday. So they won't want to give any ground at all tonight. They will want to keep this going because they have the wind at their back. That's powerful.
They've been pretty busy so far this window as well. The new signings ineligible for these games tonight. Robbie, do you think, what do you make of that? Do you think Danny Rowe will be kind of happy to keep them fresh for getting back to domestic action, or do you think he'll be disappointed maybe not to be able to give them a run out tonight?
I think we'd like to get them involved as soon as possible, but as Stephen says, that the momentum is there with Rangers, especially in the league. I think 5 on the bounce, win-wise, or potentially 6. So, they'll be looking at it as a big game at Hearts against Celtic on Sunday. Sunday is going to drop points, so this is an opportunity for Rangers to really progress, and getting a couple of guys ready for that will give them a boost going into this second half of the season. So it'll be disappointed because when you get players in, you want to use them right away. Probably not starting them, but having them on the bench, and maybe if the game's going well, they can come on and turn it for you. But because they're not available, it allows them then to prepare them a bit more for the games at the weekend and the coming games. So it's a big boost for them to have them.
What about Rangers business, Stephen? Do we expect to see any more incomings or outgoings before the end of the window?
I think so, yeah. Danny Rowe says he wants more from this window. They've already signed, I think there's a perception of signed quite well. They've signed Scott Olsen, who looks like a potentially excellent signing. They've got 2 Romans, a left back. You've got Tochi Chukwuani. So they've signed the 3 main priority positions, with really a striker possibly still to come. I think you could see them trying to do that. I think Danny Rowe hasn't ruled out a potentially marquee signing. That would be a bit of a crowd pleaser. But I think the Rangers have got themselves in a position very much unlike Celtic where they can afford to kind of lie back and just see what comes up now, because as Robbie will attest, quite often the best deals of the window come in the final week. And Rangers are in that position, whereas Celtic are still running around with their hair on fire. A bit like Hearts, Rangers have made some astute signings, and they're probably in quite a good place. They don't need to panic. They can just pick up any little kind of gems that come up in the final week or so, and that's a good place to be.
Robbie, you were very familiar with Romans. We spoke about him last week, I think. But have you been impressed with Rangers' business in this window?
I think they have. They've put in signed in a couple of key areas, but as Stephen said, and as we know, every manager in every window that we've discussed earlier on wants a striker, but a striker is very, very hard to get in this window. So if you can pick out the kind of key areas or the lesser areas, let's say like a 2 Romans at left back, where you can get that done early, get them in the team, it allows you then towards the end of the window when the better targets come up. Because realistically, the players that Rangers are looking at in those areas, if they want a marquee signing, they will have other options, these players. And it's how long Rangers hold out for these guys to see if other deals maybe fall through and then they eventually get them, or do they jump early? But I think because they've got a few in already, kind of calms everyone down, calms the fan base down, calms the board down, everyone, and it allows them then to wait for the key one at the end, similar to the way Hearts have done, whereas Celtic, could probably do with doing a bit more business a bit more earlier.
One thing with Rangers though is they have got quite a big squad now, and I think if you were to speak to Andrew Cavan, he would tell you that they need to address it at some point. You look at guys like Neil, Off-well and so on, players who probably they could do with getting out the door because it's becoming just a little bit bloated there. So they'll have that in mind as well, I suspect.
I think with that, it's always really difficult to move players out. That's the hardest part. It's really easy to sign them. It's difficult to move them out. But when you bring other players in their position, it then pressurises them a little bit, and then realise that they're not going to get an opportunity. So sometimes you have to bring in before you move out, because if you move out first, the players that are coming in, the agents realise that you're desperate for somebody in that position. So the month of January is always one where your kind of squad is at the start of it's pretty bloated, and then you then start moving them out as you get towards the end of the month.
Well, looking ahead to tonight's action, you can hear live coverage of both games from 5 o'clock on BBC Radio Scotland Extra and online at the BBC Sport website. Turning back to domestic front, Aberdeen continue to remain without a manager. The club say they've now reached a point where they've got a shortlist, but Stephen, this process seems to be dragging on a bit for Aberdeen, doesn't it?
I think they're reasonably relaxed about it. Whether they should be is a different matter. But I mean, they're beginning to interview candidates now. I think we're probably down to a short list of 4 or 5. I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up with another overseas manager based overseas in a minute. I mean, they're interviewing candidates. Been talking some English outlets of Stephen Robinson and John McGowan being front runners. I don't think there is a front runner. I think they are. You would imagine with Big Lutz Fahrenstein is leading the process that there will be a possibility of German candidates on there. I think it's acknowledged there will be, but I'm led to believe that there's one candidate currently in a job overseas from a country which is not Germany. So I'm actually wondering if it might be Robbie Neilson.
No, it's not me, mate. No, it's not. Don't worry about that. I'll still be here.
I was like for a scoop here thinking listen, Robbie couldn't take the pay cut. That's the thing, isn't it?
No, I don't know about that, mate.
He doesn't want to move from Belgium to Aberdeen. That's
controversial.
I know, but it's interesting it's taking so long. You know, and that tells me it's probably someone that's in a job, as Stephen was saying, you know, because if they were going to go for someone, because I know the guy Marcus Gisdol was getting spoken about, who's just left Turkey. If it was going to be somebody like him, you would pretty smooth process to bring him in because he's not in a role. So by having interview processes and this taking as long as it is, it generally means that it's somebody who's probably under contract somewhere. So there has to be some sort of negotiation and things like that. So yeah, it's a strange one, I think, because you want to get somebody in as quick as you can, especially in this window. You know, the longer it drags on, is it going to be a manager that comes in after the window shuts and then recruitment is not, he doesn't have any input in that? That potentially is the structure they want to go in Aberdeen, I don't know. Or do you bring somebody in soon and allow them to then assist with the recruitment? So yeah, it's definitely a different way of doing things.
It's interesting they're still making signings, isn't it? I mean, still bringing in players like Liam Morrison and is it Alice Anya brought in? I mean, it's they're still going ahead and doing their business in the transfer window despite not having a manager. So I suppose that shows the impact of the technical director.
Yeah, I think the technical director obviously has a huge input in the way the team is going to play and he wants the team to play. But I think that the sooner they get a manager in or a head coach in, it will probably be the better, just to allow the two of them to work together, to get the signs, because I think it's important that a head coach has some sort of input in it. So yeah, I would expect it to get done next week, 2 weeks maximum, because they really want to get someone in before that window shuts.
That's one thing though, Robbie, isn't it? I mean, it makes sense for a technical director to be right front, left and centre of this process because they're going to have to work hand in hand, and that's an important relationship, isn't it? It needs to work.
Yeah, I think it's really important, not just from a football perspective, but also from a personal perspective. Because it's two key roles within the football department, probably the biggest within the department football-wise, because they have to have a relationship. So I think that there'll be conversations on like style of play, be conversations on recruitment, the processes and how where the manager or the head coach sits within the recruitment side of things as well. There'll be conversations with that. But one of the key things is the relationship. Can they get on together? Because I think like the sporting director is, obviously on the bench as we see at the moment. Whether that will continue when the new head coach comes in, I don't know, but it'll probably be a decision between the two of them. So yeah, I think there's There's the sporting director plays a big role at most clubs nowadays, to be honest with you.
Well, looking up the table domestically, Hearts obviously quite comfortable at the top for the moment, but they're facing being without Cammy Devlin and Lawrence Shanklin now for several weeks. Stephen, how much of an impact do you think that being without those two players could have on this title race?
Funny, isn't it? There's been so much talk unfairly of a bubble bursting at Hearts, and every time someone talks about it, it never really happens. But I think there's a feeling now that if you're losing Lawrence Shanklin, if you're losing Cammy Devlin for a couple of months or a long spell, then that's a real test, because you'd probably say they have absolutely been up here as certainly two of their most important players of the season. Devlin in particular, who's going on to a new level, and that might be related to his contract situation, it might not, I don't know. But Hearts have tried to sign Laurent Mendy from Forest Green Rovers, and they've been unsuccessful with that. I dare say they will go back for him. It's interesting, they've got an option in Rogers Mato from FK Vardar. So Hearts have been moving forward with some really positive recruitment in this window. They've signed a few players. Jameson Analytic are going about their business. Question is whether they can do anything before Sunday, because if they could get 3 in a row against Celtic, my goodness, I think there would be a real feeling then. 9 points behind Hearts with 14, 15 games to go, whatever it would be. That would be a really tall order for Celtic to get themselves back in the title race.
Robbie, what do you make of them being without Lawrence Shanklin for the next month or two?
I think it'll be difficult, to be honest with you. I think this is the real challenge now for Hearts and also for Jamestown Analytics. Can they get someone in? Lawrence is one of those players that, as you've seen, I remember watching the Dundee game a couple of months ago where Dundee actually started at Tynecastle. Dundee started the game really, really well, probably on top, and then out of nowhere, Lawrence scored a left-footed shot from about 25 yards, and it changed the game like that. And that's what Lawrence can do. And a lot of the games this season, Hearts it's been quite a tight game, and then there's been a moment of magic from most of the time Lawrence, sometimes Braga, sometimes one of the centre-halves come up with a set play. So the games have been quite tight. And losing that, and also losing that threat of Lawrence, because I think when Hearts attack, a lot of the focus goes on him from the opposition, and then it allows someone else to be free. When he's not there, they can then spread the kind of defensive line a little bit. So I think he'll be a big loss. I think Cammy Devlin's a big loss as well, because he brings that intensity and aggression within the midfield. So it's a real test. And also, I think Beningame is available for the weekend, but he's got a suspension as well, potentially coming up after that. So it's he will be a loss as well, because the two of them in that centre midfield, Beningame and Devlin, have a great relationship, as I know, because they coached them. So yeah, this game at the weekend is massive for both clubs. Massive for Hearts to take that next step away, but also, as Stephen said, if Celtic lose that game, 9 points with 14 to go, I'm not sure Hearts will lose another 3-4 games to allow Celtic to go back in it, and that would mean that Celtic would have to win 14 games on the bounce, and Hearts would need to lose 3, and I'm not sure Hearts will do that. So I think this game is a real pivotal moment in the season.
This is the thing, isn't it, as well, is they've got these injury problems. If they can come through this game against Celtic at the weekend and win without Shanklin, without Devlin, all of a sudden you're looking at Hearts and you're thinking, well, where are they going to slip up?
Yeah, I think if they win at the weekend, I wouldn't say it's done, but they've taken a massive step, because you're going into 14 games to go. Hearts need to lose 3 games, and Celtic need to win 14. And we can see this season that Celtic haven't been a team that have been able to go 14 in a row. So you start to look at it and you go, where's the point swing going to come again? So it's a massive game, massive, and I'll be definitely watching it from over here.
I think the perception would definitely be, if Hearts won at the weekend, that the big threat, the big danger would come from Rangers.
Yes.
Because as we said earlier, Rangers have the wind at the back. They've got new signings in the door. They're building a bit of momentum. I think it'd always be dangerous to write off Celtic. But every time you look at Celtic this season, you're looking for the big traditional, the late rally, the late onslaught. It doesn't come. I don't think it would come in the league either. And it would raise big questions about what they did in the last week of the window. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's no margin for error for Celtic at all. They have to go to Tynecastle and win. And I think if Hearts avoid defeat, they will be in a really strong position still.
Well, that is all we've got time for. Many thanks to Robbie and Stephen, and thank you very much for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we shall catch you again very soon.
On BBC Sounds. From life aboard a Russian submarine to chairman of Hearts Football Club.
At this stage, he was the hero.
But as his controversial decisions escalated...
They said, we're going to sack George. And I'm going, you can't do this.
How did Vladimir Romanov go from Hearts saviour to a wanted man?
They caused a whole load of chaos and havoc.
Romanov, Tsar of Hearts. Listen now on BBC Sounds.